Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Couple Takes on MS. This is Dan Digman.
And I'm Jennifer Digman. And we have stories to share because if you recall, we both are living with multiple sclerosis.
And we're coming to you tonight from sunny Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Enjoying the summer weather. It's actually pretty cool in the shade right now.
It's enjoyable if you don't count the mosquitoes because I don't know about where you're listening, but we have crazy amounts of biting mosquitoes. So we are surrounded by candles right now.
I was going to say it's burning hot. So, coming back after what we talked about last time was about reclaiming your independence, and hopefully you've been able to move forward and maybe find some new ways to live your life despite your multiple sclerosis.
And it's interesting because Dan and I have been moving forward, but it's not an ongoing process. I mean, it is an ongoing process, but you're never done. And you always need to just look back to where you came from to see what you've accomplished. And in my life, I was diagnosed 20 years ago almost. And I remember being so full of questions and uncertainty. And not that I don't have my fair share of uncertainty now, but there are so many resources available and so many things to help people live their best life despite MS.
And that's what we're here to talk about tonight is the resources that you turn to help you move forward and accomplish your visions and dreams of living with multiple sclerosis. And I think that what's interesting is, Jennifer was diagnosed, 19 years ago, and I was diagnosed 17 years ago. And, back in the day, sounding like old people, but back in the day, it's almost like there weren't a lot of resources readily available at your fingertips.
As hard as it may be to believe, there was a time when we were diagnosed where you didn't have the capability to just hop on the internet and look up a symptom. You actually had to go to the library or go to an actual book, as hard it is to believe, or trust the resources that your doctor gave you, your neurologist, or your self-help group, the things you learned in the pamphlets you picked up. But times have changed, and in these 20 years, we're so much more fortunate to have so many incredible resources at our disposal.
And I think when I was first diagnosed, certainly there were the brochures from the National MS Society, but as far as the internet, it still was in its formative stages, if we can call it formative stages. I think that back in the day, when I graduated from college, email had just come onto the scene, and I thought it was like almost a waste of time because I didn't see the need for it, because the only time I saw it was when two friends of mine sat across the computer lab from each other and sent each other messages, and now look at where would the world be without email?
And it's hard to believe that we ever functioned without the internet or without technology. But back when I was diagnosed, like I said, my doctor gave me a book to read about MS, and if you had questions, you had to ask him or go to another book to find out the answers. And even then, back then, there was a little bit of AOL dial-up modems and things for the internet, but the information wasn't as credible as it is now. And I think that's what's really important, is that we do have good, credible information at our fingertips.
And I think that's where everything in this day and age needs to start, is with the internet. It's an easy place to start is the internet and going online and looking at the websites. And I think we'll start off just as far as one of the biggest websites is, of course, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society.
And we're not being paid to talk about certain things. These are the information sources that Dan and I have used to help us live with the disease for almost 20 years each. And so the NMSS.org, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, is a very credible, trustworthy site and a great place to start when you're first diagnosed, or even if it's been 20 years, you can get more information there.
And I think just to go, it's almost like the trinity of of multiple sclerosis websites. We have the National MS Society, but there's also the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America and the MS Foundation.
And the NMSS has, a capability to check with your state chapter. And some states don't have an individual state chapter, but they have the information that they share. And that's what's neat about that trinity that Dan discussed. The NMSS, the Multiple Sclerosis Association, and the MS Foundation, they share information, and it's trustworthy and a great resources to have.
And I think that's what we're talking about when you look at everything that's online. Basically, you can put anything up there, and whether or not it's true, and lots of scams or just people putting up false information. But that's where these three organizations and their websites and their resources that they have within their websites are very trustworthy and give you a good comprehensive look at the disease. And with the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America, that website is mymsaa.org, and the MS Foundation is msfocus.org. And so check those out for good, credible information.
But another resource is something like healthline.com or webmd.com, mangohealth.com. Those are some medical websites that not only focus on multiple sclerosis, but a variety of conditions. And just because you have MS doesn't mean you don't have to deal with other health issues. And so you can go to these other sites and get credible, again, I can't stress that word enough, trustworthy information.
Well, I mean, what was that like for you when you were first diagnosed then? I mean, you had to wait around for brochures. I mean, what were some of the bigger topics that you were looking for when you're first diagnosed? What was the first thing you ever looked up?
The first thing I ever looked up was, how long is it going to be until I'm in a wheelchair? I wanted to know what to expect. And I was most afraid of the wheelchair, but I also looked at things because people didn't know how to handle someone with MS. I remember my grandmother took me on a trip, and she said, "What happens if your MS just acts up? I don't know what I would do." And I had to explain to her and give her some information that MS doesn't work that quickly. It's not like we're going to be out at shopping or something and boom, I'm going to fall down and be like, I can't feel my legs. it may happen to some, but I didn't expect it to happen to me. So not only did I have to educate myself, but I had to educate my family and friends.
And I think for me, I just really just needed to know what MS was. I think I had never really heard. Obviously, you've heard of it, but I didn't really understand.
And I don't know how about you, Dan, but when I was first diagnosed, I had to clearly explain that I had multiple sclerosis and not muscular dystrophy. And even still today, I have to explain the difference sometimes. And I don't know, you remember Jerry Lewis, that telethon that was so popular 15 years ago. I had to clarify I was not one of Jerry's kids, which is not to slight that, but the two diseases are different.
And I just, I remember what that was like. I think that I had first really consciously heard of multiple sclerosis when it had come out that Clay Walker had been diagnosed, and I felt really bad because I didn't know that much about the disease. But then, like with every new album that he'd put out, I'd say, "Oh, that's great. Clay Walker is still around," because I didn't understand. Look at that today. I mean, he's one of the, still a country music icon, and he's a great warrior in our battle with multiple sclerosis.
Yes, and he's an ambassador almost for living your best life with the disease. And there are so many other famous people that are living with the disease that kind of hold strong to the reality that you can live with this disease.
I guess the nice thing about the internet, what it's done for the MS world in terms of education, I think it's really building the online communities, because obviously what we're giving you tonight in this program is not like a comprehensive list of every single source that's out there. These are just the resources that we turn to and have found most helpful in our years living with the disease. But I mean, as far as with the internet, all of the communities and all of the areas that
you can't think about the internet and not think about social networks. And that social network, I mean, this radio show is just a glimpse into it. But the Facebook communities, you are not alone when you are diagnosed with this disease. Whether you know someone or it's in your family, if you go out there and you want support, it can be found. And that's so important, because this is a really isolating disease. And it's nice to know that you have people you can speak with, maybe not in person, but at the touch of your fingertips.
And I think that's where with the online communities, I mean, obviously Facebook is a quick and easy place, because I don't know how many Facebook communities I belong to, and just wherever you turn, I know that, like, for me, I don't know how often Jennifer goes to it, but there's a Facebook community for MS caregivers, because it's like, people who are dealing with the same thing, and then just everything else with MS pals and
with MS, with Healthline's MS Buddy. I have the disease, and yes, I'm a caregiver for Dan, but my disease is more progressed than Dan's. I was diagnosed in '97, and 5 years after my diagnosis, I no longer could walk, and I was classified with secondary progressive. So with Healthline's MS Buddy app, I can be connected with other people who are living with the disease and potentially have the same form of MS. And that's nice, because yes, Dan has MS, and I have him in my
I'm right
life.
here, babe.
Exactly, I have him in my life all the time. But he has got relapsing remitting. And maybe sometimes some of the questions I have about my disease, it's nice to be able to find someone who's living with the same form of MS.
And so it's through the online communities, through Instagram, through Twitter. I think it's just a matter of finding those areas, finding those people.
And as much as I like Twitter, that's I always appreciate any of Dan's help. I always giggle when I say Twitter, because I remember a commercial from several years back about needing help to compose a tweet, and that help is in my husband, because Dan helps me tweet sensibly, and it's just a really easy, quick way to be connected. across the world because there are so many people living with this disease.
And also talking about the individual contacts, I mean, don't forget about the blogs. There's countless MS blogs. Obviously, we would say that we have our blog, danandjenniferdigman.com, but you can go so many places. Go to our website for the blog roll, or just even looking up MS blogs and just find the countless ones, and find the voices of people that you can trust and relate to most.
And don't look for the voices that just say what you want to hear. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but this disease does not have a cure. And so if anyone's trying to tell you something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So you have to have a certain level of having your head on straight, that if someone says something that seems a little outlandish, double check you have the resources that we've mentioned to make sure that these outlandish claims are really credible, and that you're not going to get suckered into something that will make MS even worse for you.
And that's where you don't have a one-size-fits-all thing. This is a very complex disease, and this is why the fact that we have just almost like information overload on the internet for what this disease is, and how it's treated, what causes, how you live with it. What a blessing that there is so much, because then that gives us the ability to check and cross-reference and make sure that it's credible and it's where we want to go with our disease.
And I hope Dan doesn't mind me saying this, but he works at Central Michigan University, and he was writing a story about autism, which is a disease that is prevalent, and one of the subjects he was interviewing said, if you know a person with autism, you know a person with autism. That you don't know. That was kind of right, the quote.
Yeah, well, he was just talking.
I don't want to mess it up. Sorry, babe.
Well, he was talking just about how autism affects everyone is different. There's no one case, no two cases that are the same, and that's what he just said. He's like, if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism, because
I kind of got it.
You were so close.
And when I was first diagnosed, and forgive me if you've heard this analogy before, someone said that MS is like snowflakes. If you've ever heard no two snowflakes are the same, MS never presents itself the same in any two people. So your case of MS may be different. Why is Dan still walking and I'm in a wheelchair? What did he do that I didn't? We don't know, but I think that it's important to just take care of yourself and to focus on living your best life. And that's why these resources are really important. And I know that the information is important, but when I was first diagnosed, my doctor put me on a disease-modifying therapy right away. How about you, Dan?
He had me quite quickly. I think I was diagnosed on Valentine's Day, and I started the therapy within like a month's time. I think the biggest hang-up on that was clearing insurance and everything, because at that point, I had insurance, but my insurance did not cover injectable medications, which back in the day, that's all MS was. And so
all the treatments were injectable medications.
There were 3 injectable medications. And so with that, and that's something that we all need to do, is just be your own best advocate when these things come up. And that's why the resources give you legs to stand on. But I'm like, it was silly, because the only injectable medication my insurance covered was insulin for diabetics. And I was like, why not? Because, you think of the cost of MS medications and how expensive those were, even at a 10% copay. It's still really expensive. So I made the case for that, and CMU's covered that and many other injectable medications ever since.
And you don't have to have insurance to be on a disease-modifying therapy. Most drug companies for any of the 14 disease-modifying therapies out there have patient assistance programs. I remember when I was first diagnosed, I did not have insurance, and I was taking Copaxone, and that was expensive, and I didn't know how I was going to pay it. I was a new college graduate. How was I going to pay for this medication? And that's when I reached out to the National Organization for Rare Disorders, NORD, N-O-R-D, and rarediseases.org. And they helped me pay for my Copaxone. And so for the first 2 years before I was able to get insurance, I was able to continue treating my disease. And so like I said, just about every drug company has patient assistance programs. And I know that the big three, the Holy Trinity that Dan referred to, also can help you pay for your drugs. Because no one with MS should have to sacrifice medication that could treat the progression of this disease.
And so that's why it's so key to be cued in on these resources.
And it really will help you. I mean, you have a disease that's progressive any way you slice it. Whether you want to say that you have relapsing, remitting, or secondary progressive, or primary progressive, all forms of multiple sclerosis are progressing. And that's why you need to take care of your health and be proactive. Don't wait to get worse. Whether you want to take medication or advise against it and you don't feel comfortable, you need to take care of your health. And that's, lots of just taking care of your body and your mind, because this disease can really, really play games with your mind. What's the word I'm looking for, babe? Not like mentally, but just your determination and your self-esteem. And that's why it's really important to be proactive, to eat well, to exercise, and just so you don't give MS any more ground than it deserves to have.
And I think another source, as we were talking about just even the news and developments as far as like cutting edge and breaking news in terms of like when there's like a new disease or new treatment. So not new disease, new disease treatment, new treatment for the disease. Something that helps me, and I would encourage, and I'm trying to convince Jennifer this, is go to Google, and then go to Google News, because you can do like a Google News search where it's like set up where every day you'll get like a summary of any news story the previous day that mentioned multiple sclerosis. You'll get like a report on like the headlines and everything. I know that there's a lot of updates for, I think it's Multiple Sclerosis News, which is another great resource to have, just in terms of, especially when there were new drugs coming out, and there were like, I think it was the Tysabri, back in the day, when there are new developments, new drugs, and all of a sudden they had like pulled them, or the FDA put a halt on them or something, because you were supposed to be on that
because of the PML. And it's good to just see those notifications, and certainly my neurologist would have told me, but it's good to just be informed, unless you're going to a specialty MS clinic. Your neurologist is dealing with so many other neurological conditions. It's really important to be informed and to go in to your doctor's appointments with kind of, I don't want to say an arsenal because that sounds violent, but just a bevy of resources so that you can say to your doctor, I see that Ocrevus has been released and I'm thinking about that. Don't wait for your doctor to tell you. Or in my case, when my MS was progressing, I didn't sit around and wait for my neurologist to put me on a different treatment. I was very aggressive, and I said, I think I need to try something else. else. I mean, it's your health. You have to be your own advocate. And that's really important.
So when you first found out about, so you weren't happy with the treatment you were receiving or the medicine you were on. How did you find out about the other drug?
I went to my self-help group, and that's really interesting because that's an excellent resource. You know, if you have a self-help group in your area, just to speak with other people, and that again dates me how old I am, that I had to use a self-help group to find out information about other drugs that were available. But even now, still, you can go online and get a self-help group and say to someone, oh, this isn't working for me. What do you suggest? Again, take it with a grain of salt. Oh, this is someone's opinion and they're not doctors, but it is good information to have.
I just think that's what's interesting, just thinking about, like, how did we come up with this, or how did we decide? I mean, just like, how did we get connected to have a show on MS&Me radio? It's just like, you build those connections, and I think that's another big thing that goes to pretty much all of this stuff combined, is just build connections and stuff, because Jennifer said, MS can be an isolating disease, but I mean, connect yourself to so many other people through the internet, through the websites, through the blogs, the online communities, the MS Buddy apps, all of that things, because it builds in your arsenal of resources and people who can help you through this.
And don't feel uncomfortable if people ask questions, or be there to help your family. They may have questions and they may not want to ask them. But if you are informed, you can inform them. And I remember when I was diagnosed, hearing the first time that knowledge is power. And that is so true with multiple sclerosis. To be informed about this condition that you're living with helps to make you more powerful.
And I think that's where we'll end with it tonight. Just thanking you all for checking in with us again. For another episode, just to talk about the resources that help us. And obviously there are so many others out there, so we just encourage you to go out, find, get into your group and find what works for you. These were just those that were, like, initially right off the top of our head, and just the initial ones that we go to pretty much, I don't want to say daily, but often.
We go to them often and feel powerful and informed.
So thank you again for listening to a couple takes on MS, just to see different sides of the disease.
And we will talk to you again next week. Have a good week and fight MS.
All right.